Okay, kids, we last left off with Mrs. Norris hanging from the wall, but not to worry. We'll learn what happened to her next. Okay? So, Chapter 9, The Writing on the Wall. What's going on here? What's going on? Attracted no doubt by Malfoy's shout, Argus Filch came shouldering his way through the crowd. Then he saw Mrs. Norris and fell back. Don't worry. Clutching his face in horror. My cat! My cat! What's happened to Mrs. Norris? He shrieked, and his popping eyes fell on Harry. You! He screeched. You've done this to my cat! You! Argus? Dumbledore had arrived on the scene, followed by a number of other teachers. In seconds he had swept past Harry, Ron, and Hermione, and detached Mrs. Norris from the torch basket. "Come with me, August," he said to Filch. "You too, Mr. Potter, Mr. Weasley, and Miss Granger." Lockhart stepped forward eagerly. "My office is nearest, Headmaster, just upstairs. Please feel free." "Thank you, Gilderoy," said Dumbledore. The silent crowd parted to let them pass. Lockhart, looking excited and important, hurried after Dumbledore. So did Professors McGonagall and Snape. As they entered Lockhart's darkened office, there was a flurry of movement across the walls. Harry saw several of the Lockharts in their pictures dodging out of sight, their hair in rollers. The real Lockhart lit the candles on his desk and stood back. Dumbledore laid Mrs. Norris on the polished surface and began to examine her. Harry, Ron, and Hermione exchanged tense looks and sank into chairs outside the pool of candlelight, watching. The tip of Dumbledore's long, crooked nose was barely an inch from Mrs. Norris's fur. He was looking at her closely through his half-moon spectacles, his long fingers gently prodding and poking. Professor McGonagall was bent almost as close, her eyes narrowed. Snape loomed behind them, half in shadow, wearing a most peculiar expression. It was as though he was trying hard not to smile. And Lockhart was hovering around all of them, making suggestions. "It was definitely a curse that got her, probably the transmogrifian torture. I've seen it many, many times. So unlucky I wasn't there. I knew the very counter curse that would have saved her." Lockhart's comments were punctuated by Filch's dry, racking sobs. He was slumped in a chair by the desk, unable to look at Mrs. Norris, his face in his hands. Much as he detested Filch, Harry couldn't help but feeling a bit sorry for him, though not nearly as sorry as he felt for himself. If Dumbledore believed Filch, he would be expelled for sure. Dumbledore was now muttering strange words under his breath, and tapping Mrs. Norris with his wand, but nothing happened. She continued to look as though she had been recently stuffed. "I remember something very similar happening in Uggugadu," said Lockhart. "A series of attacks. The full story is in my autobiography. I was able to provide the townsfolk with various amulets, which cleared the matter up at once." The photographs of Lockhart on the walls were all nodding in agreement as he talked. One of them had forgotten to remove his hairnet. At last Dumbledore straightened up. "She is not dead, Argus," he said softly. Lockhart stopped abruptly in the middle of counting the number of murders he had prevented. "Not dead," choked Filch, looking as though his fingers looking through his fingers at Mrs. Norris. "But why, she's all stiff and frozen." "She's been petrified," said Dumbledore. "Ah, I thought so," said Lockhart. "But how, I cannot say." "Ask him!" shrieked Filch, turning his blotched and tear-stained face to Harry. "No second year could have done this," said Dumbledore firmly. "It would take dark magic of the most advanced." "He did it! He did it!" Filch spat, his pouchy face purpling. "You saw what he wrote on the wall. He found in my office. He knows I'm a... Filch's face worked horribly. "He knows I'm a squib," he finished. "I never touched Mrs. Norris," Harry said loudly, uncomfortably aware that everyone was looking at him, including all the Lockharts on the walls. "And I don't even know what a squib is." Rubbish, snarled Finch. He saw my quick-spell letter. If I might speak, headmaster, said Snape from the shadows, and Harry's sense of foreboding increased. He was sure nothing Snape had to say was going to do him any good. Potter and his friends may have simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time, he said, a slight sneer curling his mouth as though he doubted it. But we do have a set of suspicious circumstances here. Why was he in the upstairs corridor at all? Why wasn't he at the Halloween feast? Harry, Ron, and Hermione all launched into an explanation about the Death Day party. There were hundreds of ghosts. They'll tell you we were there. But why didn't you join the feast afterward? Said Snape, his black eyes glittering in the candlelight. Why go up that corridor? Ron and Hermione looked at Harry. Because, Harry said, his heart thumping very fast. Something told him it would sound very far-fetched if he told them he had been led there by a bodiless voice no one but he could hear. Because we were tired and wanted to go to bed, he said. Without any supper, said Snape, a triumphant smile flickering across his gaunt face. I didn't think ghosts provided food fit for living people at their parties. We weren't hungry, said Ron loudly as his stomach gave a huge rumble. Snape's nasty smile widened.